we'll do the live thing first. Like, hey everybody, welcome back to the podcast. I'm here with my buddy Cooper Schnurr. Everyone, welcome to the podcast, brother. How are you?
I am swell, sir. I am swell.
Good to see you. So Coop and I, for everyone listening, Coop and I, we went to school together. We went to Western. Coop was basically the mayor of Western. So anyone who's listening that went there, you probably know this guy. He basically just ran show, and here he is today. So were you how long were you a Don?
So I was an RA for a year. I was what they call like an APC, assistant program coordinator. So I basically oversaw like the programming requirements and things like that. So more of the fun, less of the discipline. So
nice.
That's where I learned to meet with a lot of people. But yes, I did that for like 2 years. So in third and fourth year, I did that. So it was good times, man. It was a blast. Like totally.
You got to like stay in school, right? Like they gave you a room.
Yeah, so I got a room, so it was sweet because like in third year I lived in Saugeen again, which was just a gong show, but as you can imagine. But yeah, in fourth year I lived in Alumni, like had a 2-floor suite. It was amazing, man. Like, but I just was around everybody, right? So it's 3 years of frosh, just 3 years of softs, 3 years of everything, right? So you end up meeting a lot of people, right? So it ends up being pretty good.
Buddy, unreal. I mean,
yeah.
So what would you say? Like like I know you kind of got to meet a lot of kids that way. You got to learn a lot, and you think like how was it living on campus that whole time?
Honestly, man, it was the best, man. Like in reality, people, I think friends of mine that lived off campus, you get your 6 or 8 buddies you live with, or 3 or 4, whatever it ends up being, and that's your group, and that's the guys you hang with. You got a couple other buddies around, but like for me, it was new every year, definitely. But like, it's not like it's like first year, man, you meet 50 people and they become your best friends for whatever reason, because, you know, when you're sleeping beside somebody, you can slap them in the face. They're that close. You get pretty close. So it's good and bad, I think. But
yeah,
you end up being around a lot of people. So because of that, I was able to meet a lot of people, and not only, you know, first years, but also upper year staff, because I was on a lot of different staff teams, and, you know, I looked after a lot of different buildings, right? So you end up meeting a lot of people. And to me, like I don't know how you could live it any other way. Like I looked at it from my perspective, and it's just like you end up meeting so many people, and you get to live a life that's like so much broader than the basics of what normal people consider to be college, right? We all had our buddies, and you go to parties and you do your things, but it's like, it just seemed to be so much more. And, you know, it's like big campus schools though. Big campus schools, some people struggle with, but I thrived, man. I loved it.
Yeah, people can get lost in the mix. I totally agree. I was with you. I enjoyed every minute, and you know, it's really different. Your experience was so different, and I mean, my res experience was obviously held to first year. Right. I was at London Hall, right, which was a little bit different with Benny and everybody, which was that upper year, right? Had like the nice big beds and everything.
Yeah.
So that was like kind of like a softer res experience. We didn't even have like a front desk where people like checked. Everyone listening, there's like a front desk usually at residences at Western anyway. Most universities do this, right? Where they have like whoever's in the residence, they have like a reference book essentially where they can show you, like, cross-reference your ID and make sure you live there. And sometimes you can bring guests. Yeah, exactly. Make sure you're not just coming in there with a pizza box full of drugs. But waiting behind the door to jack you with a sock full of pennies.
Jack you with a sock full of pennies. Bird's eye sees all.
Sees all. But sorry, Schnurr and I are major Seinfeld fans, and I hope everyone's ready to hear many a reference today. And hold tight, because we're going to start our own podcast, and it's just going to be about Seinfeld, and we're going to go episode by episode and just go over each episode.
Yeah.
You know what's happening.
With no criticisms of any kind.
Absolutely. No, we're just going to quote the whole episode, and people are going to be like, well, I could have just watched the episode. But no, you're going to watch us just have a grand old time.
It was crazy. I got a question. Like, when you were at school with football, like, you would have had a totally different experience than the rest of us, because that's such a huge part of your life. You know what I mean? Like,
well, yeah.
Not only ours, but just the guys and that experience.
that's the thing. I mean, that was also weird about my personal experience, is that I was the only football player in all of London Hall. There was no other football players. I mean, Linny, my roommate, was the only other like athlete really. There was, I think, a guy maybe on the soccer team, maybe, and there was like a girl on the friggin' curling team, and like a girl on like the track team, and it was just kind of like just because it was so, like, so basically what happened was they sent out this letter when I was getting into first year that said they let too many first years in or something like that. And
yeah,
like,
I remember that.
because I was a year older, they're like, hey, would you like to go to this London Hall, this residence that was mostly for upper years, that they had to get like at least an 80% average to get in there. And so like they were obviously all older and, super serious about school.
Right.
And it was kind of just like,
didn't quite fit to yours.
Well, not even. It was just the first floor was first years. So there wasn't even that many kids in there that were first year. So, I mean, we made it our own for sure. I'm sure those upper years probably weren't too happy. It was strange because it was the first floor and half the second floor, but I never even really went upstairs. Our buddy Ian actually used to live upstairs, and he's the only guy that I would actually like, I swear to God, he's the only person I knew that was up there. Anyway, being the only most of the football guys were in Essex. So at Western, there's the two like obviously Schnurr knows, but the two residences are basically they share a parking lot, and Essex had most of the football guys in it. Really, some guys were in Perth,
right by the stadium,
right, and they mostly all lived together. There was actually what they kind of did, which is cool. They did like 2 football players and 2 like random guys in Essex, because it was like an apartment style.
In a 4-person room,
and that would have been ideal. It's actually funny enough. Our buddy B-Rye, he was in a room with 3 other guys, and I was in London Hall. So I bet I was supposed to be B-Rye's roommate, but because they bumped me over to London Hall, it just got up, which is jokes that we ended up being friends anyway. So, but it was just like, we were in residence like 2 weeks before school even started.
Right. Yeah. Doing
like
football.
The football team rolled in there because we had training camp that we had to come on in, and we actually were, all the first year guys were that, or at least all the guys that didn't have a place to stay were in Perth. So that's where they put us all first, and they roomed everyone together for people to get to know each other. Or if you were like from the same high school, they'd put you in the same like traditional style room.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we were there like 2 weeks before doing our thing. I knew a buddy who actually, my buddy Zach, he was supposed to go to Waterloo, but we were in the same first year together.
Yeah.
We were in the same year, right?
Yeah. We were first year together.
So remember the year before Waterloo got busted for
and they got banned forever, basically.
Well, they got banned for the whole year. So their coach unfortunately got fired, Dennis McPhee, who actually ended up coming to Western, and he coached with us. And the whole he's a great coach. He used to coach in the CFL, all kinds of stuff. But the whole program got shut down, and basically all the guys that got recruited that year, the CIS at the time, U Sport now, but the CIS was said, we won't make you redshirt if you transfer. Like if you transfer to Western,
right? What had nothing to do with you,
yeah, because you guys weren't even at the school, so go ahead. Even actually,
they can't penalize you for being in high school at the time,
right? And I think actually all the guys that were on Waterloo were given this opportunity, so they could transfer. Like even the seniors, that that would have freaking sucked. Or I guess not seniors, because they would have been gone, but like the juniors or whatever, right before they leave, they could have went to another school, at least play it out or wherever.
Do something.
That's so hard to do. Like just come on, like essentially anyone that came, like not too many guys came to Western, I have to admit. And not too many of them stuck around. Like unfortunately my buddy like had to didn't make the team, and it was just like a whirlwind. He was a DB too, and there was like 25 DBs that year. It's tough, man. There's so many guys. Western recruits a lot of guys too.
Yeah.
So
what's that line, right? If we're all such great coaches, why do we recruit so much?
Well, man, honestly, they have the pick of the litter. There's no doubt about it. And so again, getting into res really early was super strange, because you just kind of had the run of the place. And then all of a sudden your like roommates show up and you're kind of like, yeah, I've been here for 2 weeks, man. and I'm like rugged because I just did 2-a-days for 2 weeks.
Yeah, you're puking everywhere. It's just a
Yeah,
disaster.
it's not even like, oh, I've just been hanging out for 2 weeks. It's like I've
Well, it's a
literally been
different.
getting
I think it's
smoked.
good. I think it's really good what like having that option that you guys had to be first years because you were that older group. Like you and I
Yeah.
are a year apart, right? But you had that older group to go back to. I think is huge because honestly, like that. My screen is turned off.
Hup.
That will come back. My face will light up again. That age bracket is such a huge thing. That 17, 18, 19 age period, especially guys that are on the football team, like, not necessarily football, but sports and, high level sports,
Sure.
you do gain a bit of a maturity typically,
Right.
that allows you to handle being away from home for the first time and, parties and alcohol, whatever is new with college, right? And, tough grades and things like that. So like if you put those kids with, the 17-year-olds, like I was 17 when I came into school.
Sure.
Right. So you put those guys together, it could be a disaster, man. Like,
Man, no
because at
doubt.
that maturity is such a huge piece. Huge piece.
I that even to speak on that same thing, that was like Laval and stuff, and all those CEGEP schools would do so much better because their juniors were like 21, or sorry, their
Year
freshmen
older,
were
yeah.
like 21, not even like 3 years older, and so sometimes
Grown ass men.
they'd have a senior who was like 27 going against a potential from Ontario, a freshman who's like 17. And
Yeah.
that goes for all the school, like any sport too. It could happen in basketball,
Right.
it could happen in whatever. And 10 years difference, especially in football, is nuts.
Especially at that age.
Yeah, absolutely.
You ever go to school and then come back and play summer league at your hometown and you just eat kids alive?
Dude, forget about it. Especially after a season of football in me, man. Like, not that I wasn't able to like kind of use my size before, but I was just absolutely eating people alive. People were not happy about it.
It's absolutely ruthless, man. Like that size difference is so huge. And it's not only the size, but it's a lot of it's just like the understanding as an older player. Like I remember what we do here in town is we get, the high school kids always have a league, and I'm pretty involved in basketball here. And we get like 6 or 8 or 10 of the older guys that are half decent players, and we'll play the seniors like every year.
Right.
And like, it's usually somewhat semi-formal, get them, work it up to play an officer or something like that,
Cool.
all Ontario's and things. But like we stomp them by 50, like every time. Like,
dude,
we played them twice this year before COVID hit, or I guess last year.
Right.
First time we stomped them by 50, and the second time they were catching up to us because the youth, the speed was, we're all out of shape now. We're mid-20s or later, but they caught up to us. But it's just the little nuances of understanding, like easy basic plays are worth the same amount of points as showboat fancy plays, but the size is menacing, just like just that pure mass as a mid-20s grown ass man versus a 16-year-old kid. Like these kids, they gotta try hitting the weight room or live for 3 more years and you'll get there.
Absolutely. That's the thing, that size difference was huge. And
huge,
it's funny because when I was in high school and I played Blessed Sacrament, I played rep in Hamilton.
Right.
And I
reputable program.
It was good, man. I played I played with the guys that were a year older than me, and the coaches of our team were all assistant coaches at Mac. So we would scrimmage against like Mac, like basically Mac.
As a high school kid.
As a high school kid, I was in grade 11 too. So I was I was younger, and these guys were all in grade 12. And we would I'd have to go up and I mean, I was 6'7", probably 300 pounds. Like I was never really light. So I was able to kind of hold my own, but again, it taught me like really how, like, there's levels, right? Like even, you've played teams from the States, right? And like, it's so much more of an aggressive game. I was talking about my buddy with this. It's just like, it's more physical and all that stuff. And that same difference I find was the difference between high school and I guess the next level kind of thing. And just, that knowing how to actually use your strength, right? Because young kids, they probably have some strength. They just are friggin' flailing and they don't know what the hell's going on. They can't actually, they can't actually use it, but it's in there. And then slowly as they learn that, and again, that mental thing too, by far. Like, even like I said, after I played football, like it just made me a better basketball player just because I understood myself in space that much more. I was able to kind of read things. Like basketball and football are kind of interesting that way because they have a little bit of give and take. Like there's footwork, like a lot of the footwork as an O lineman were somewhat similar to like post moves.
Yeah.
Because your back is turned, right? Like you're moving backwards. It's kind of a strange thing. And then all of a sudden you got to turn around and finish. But in football, as an old lineman, pass blocking anyway is mostly just like you're just going backwards and hoping that, that there's space back there. And sometimes you get wiped out and it's brutal. But
that's so you can get crushed.
Well, that's
sports are weird like that, man. Sports are weird like that. That's such a huge thing. Did I ever tell you the story of me trying out for Western? You know that story?
Oh yeah, I was gonna ask you about that.
The basketball story. So I can tell you the funny story, like the real one, and like the funny part that nobody really knows about. Okay. So I played high school ball in Huntsville, and like I was okay. I thought I was better than I was, like every kid at that time, right? And like I wanted to play college ball, and so I go to try out, and I was okay. Like I probably would have sat on the bench maybe if I was lucky, right? Like I'm not saying I was a stud by any stretch of the imagination, right? I'll tell you though, if I was 6 inches taller,
you got good size. How tall are you?
Like 6'3".
Yeah.
If I was 6 inches taller, I'd be in the show right now, man.
100%.
100%. So anyway, so I go to try out for Western, and the guy that's running, I forget his name. What was it? Greg? No, not Greg Campbell. That was a football coach. What was his name?
Brad.
I didn't make the team, so it doesn't really fucking matter.
Man, the guys that honestly, I won't talk mad dispersions, but I went to a game once. I took my buddy Zach, who was just on the podcast. He was playing at Guelph, so I went to go see him. I took my dad. I took my best bud that we grew up playing basketball together. We sat behind the bench. I don't know if at Guelph University, like there's stands on both sides. So we sat behind the bench, and literally, man, we saw Campbell just like throw a temper tantrum, man, and he was just walking up and down the bench, just kind of like chirping. It was just like wasn't a good scene. And then like later that year, he signed like a 5-year contract extension and stuff. And I'm like, freaking like Western, man, pass. All they care about is football, unfortunately. Right, yeah. God bless it. And I was happy that I was on the team and it was fun. But like Western's main goal is like kind of supporting the football team and all the other teams. For sure. When we showed up, man, remember probably we showed up? Oh my God, for sure. And remember when we showed up, it was like only the football team was Under Armour. The rest of the school was Adidas. Like
That's so funny.
Like it was just a different scenario. It was a different scenario. Like there was the gym, the varsity gym was.
We had your own gym, yeah.
Right. It just was, and it made for a better football team. But at the same time, the rugby team was winning national championships. Like the women's basketball team was pretty solid. When we first showed up, the men's basketball, or actually the year before, I think the men's basketball team was in like the Ontario finals and stuff. So, but yeah, anyway, that's my Campbell story. It just was like, it was just kind of embarrassing to see. And you just never want, like when I blew my shoulder out, man, I considered like playing basketball after, but I was like, not if Campbell's
not if that guy's running the sticks. Yeah. No. Yeah. Anyway, so I'm trying out, and we get there, and I was actually a guy from my floor also tried out. He ended up making the team. He was the only one that made the team that year from the tryouts.
Okay.
And really good guy. He rode the bench most of the time. Good guy though. Anyway, so we're playing, and I think they broke us up. We were doing some scrimmages, and they broke us up into 5-on-5s, and then the other 2 or 3 teams had to run until someone scored.
Okay.
So they used to just run. You just run until someone scored, and then you'd swap out, right?
Ugh,
so anyway, so like, of course, you're gutted, which I expected, and that was the way it was going to be, right? Because the college game is much more, just endurance and speed and stamina. So
yeah.
Anyway, so I'm playing. I drive middle. I come through, ball gets tipped out of my hands. It lands on the ground. I get to the baseline. I grab it. I go to power up. Big man, elbow to the top of the head, gone. Black. Fade to black. Fade to black. So this is my recollection of it. Fade to black, and then the sit down, like the fall back, and then the, hey, it's tryouts, toughen up, sit forward, roll up, and then everybody just scatters. And I go, what? And I turn, I put my hand out, blood running from my head, touching my hand, touching the floor. It's flowing all at once.
Did I not see you right after that happened?
So this is my question. So right after that happened, blasted, right? So that was like, I forget, it was at night, absolutely buckled, and everybody loses it. So the guy comes in, and he grabs an old shirt or whatever, and he's holding it to my head, and he's going, blah, 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 and they like, saran wrap it to my face and stuff.
Right.
And then I'm like, I'm concussed, like I'm bleeding out of my face. It's blood dripping down my face like this, right?
Yeah.
Middle of tryouts, right? There's nobody there that can take me anywhere. So he goes, you okay? Sort of thing, like, how are you doing? I'm going, I'm all right. Like,
right.
And he's like, you got to go to the hospital, right? So I'm going, okay. He's like, where do you live? And I go, I live in Saugeen, which is towards the hospital way.
Oh yeah.
At that exact moment from Thames Hall where they're doing the tryout to get to Saugeen, you basically have to go through like the UCC Concrete Beach. Akon, I believe it was Akon, is having a concert on Concrete Beach at that moment. I'm talking strobes. I'm talking flashing lights, people losing their mind. I'm walking through, I got blood on my shirt. It's like one of those, Miami Vice movies where you're in the club and the guy's just been knifed or whatever, right?
No.
I swear to God, bro, Akon and I lock eyes. We lock eyes. He looks right at me. Nothing. Keeps going.
Oh, no.
Guys, he's seen way worse. I'm getting bumped. The music's going. I get through.
So you're solo on this mission, right?
I'm solo.
Dude,
I'm running solo.
Campbell sent you to the wolves, man.
He threw me to the wolves. That was it, right? So I'm running solo, but I got to go to Saugeen to get my health card. So I've got like the stupid high school penny. Right. I got the blood. I got the wrap.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I go to
that gray shirt. I remember that shirt.
I still have the shirt, bro.
Oh, bro.
It's covered. It says Western basketball. Right. Blood. Just all over it. Still have it.
Dude.
So I get to Saugeen. A couple people I know from first year. I've just met them. They're like 2-3 days in, right? They're like, what the fuck, bro? Like, what happened here?
Yeah.
I go, dude, I took a fall, man. Akon. What can I tell you? So anyway, so I get my health card, I think, and then I go to the UC hospital there, and I'm sitting there, and the girl comes out, takes me in or whatever, and she's sitting there, and then I swear to God, man, I'm sitting there, and they've got the towel over me. This is the first time in my life it's ever happened. This woman walks in like, I don't know, like she had nothing but time. She like waltzes and she like starts kind of going, okay, so what's going on here? Not like, hey, I'm the doctor, this is what I'm doing. I go, who are you? Like, just because you're wearing a jacket doesn't mean I know who you are, right? So she goes, oh yeah, like I'm what is she? It wasn't a brain surgeon, but she was like a neurologist of some kind.
Okay.
So she goes, okay, and then she gets the intern follows in about 2 minutes later, and she goes, all right, yeah, no problem, I'm gonna stitch this up, no big deal. So she goes, this is what she does. She puts drapes the towels on my face,
okay,
such that the only spot that you can see is here, right?
Yeah.
As she's doing it, she goes, okay, so we got to freeze it, we got to inject it, and the intern is injecting, and it's just dripping down my face.
No.
The rookiest intern you've ever seen in your life.
Didn't even go in.
Didn't even go in. So at that moment, the first time in my life, it never happened before, never happened since. Complete like hyperventilate. I had no control of it.
Shit.
I'm literally just sitting there talking. I'm going, like what's going on? I'm like discussing with the doctor how I'm feeling. I'm like hyperventilating. I'm like I can't breathe. I'm going, I don't understand this. Like, why am I being like this? Like, why is my body doing this? Like, I'm talking with her. She's like, well, you lost too much blood, basically, blah, blah. So but like the towel's draped over my face, right? Like I look like I'm in, Eyes Wide Shut or something.
Oh, no, the Invisible Man.
Trouble. Yeah, it's trouble. So anyway, so I get it stitched up or whatever, and then the girl says like I lost too much blood to be active for 3 months or something.
Oh my gosh.
I lost too much blood to be active for a certain amount of time, full concussion. Here's a note if you want to get out of class for like the next whatever. I'd never had a concussion before, never even close.
Okay.
The next morning, I go to class thinking, I got class, I got to go. And I swear to God, man, it was right out of the movies. I'd never experienced anything like that. Numbers on the, like the writing on the board, like off the wall, shaking. And I was like, we'll close.
Hey-o.
I'll see you next week, boys. Like,
dang.
Anyway, so that was my experience trying out for Western basketball. And needless to say, I didn't make the team. Oh, no. I didn't make the team. So
and it was like here on your head, like right on your forehead, kind of area. Right on the top of your forehead, kind of thing.
Yeah, she healed like a beauty. But that's what happened. So
see, that's funny because it makes sense because when you usually get a concussion, you get this thing called a contralateral injury, and it's where. So when in your brain is essentially, unfortunately, like basically imagine like the consistency of Jell-O inside a fish tank with some water.
Right. And so God just shaking.
Your brain is your fish tank, and your skull is the fish tank and your brain is the jello. And essentially imagine if you shook this tank of jello, it's going to go to one side and then it's going to kind of go to the other side. And that's your brain inside your skull. And that's, so for you, if you got hit in the front, it's going to come back and hit you in the back. So your injury, your concussion is actually usually in the back of your head if you get hit in the front.
Right. Yeah.
Which is your visual center is in the back. So that's probably why the numbers were coming off the page like crazy.
It was weird, wild stuff.
Jeez,
I was looking at my water bottle hard, I'll tell you that.
So that was your first and only concussion?
Yeah, so far.
Wow. Yeah, no kidding. Man, my neighbor played for Mac basketball, McMaster University for years for I think a year, but he got like over 8 concussions like in his career. He got a bunch in high school and then a bunch at university, and he had to quit.
Yeah, man. Like I hear stories of that, and it's like, you ever consider maybe changing your lifestyle?
It's like Billy Bob from that movie. Oh man, what was that one movie? The Blue. Oh no, I'm such a
Billy Bob Thornton, like Bad News Bears?
No. Yeah. It was that football movie. Oh my gosh, I'm such a knob. Anyway, and there was the 1-0 lineman. He had like only so many concussions to go, and it was like,
oh yeah, not another teen movie.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Not another teen movie.
And it was like
Billy
on the scoreboard. If he gets another concussion, he's gonna die. Anyway,
he got it on the scoreboard.
Yeah, brutal.
And he throws a football and he's sitting up in the thing and he gets dogged again. He goes down like a sack of rocks. That's so funny.
Oh no. Yeah, Varsity
Chris Evans,
Blues.
man. That's
was it
Captain
Varsity
America,
Blues?
man.
No, it was not another teen movie spoofed that, but that was from Varsity Blues that the guy had like 50 concussions and he was all friggin' sauced. Varsity Blues was like kind of half serious and like half joking. Anyway, that movie was strange. So many football movies out there.
Captain America, man.
Classic football movies, man. It's so funny. It always like struck me as strange because I always kind of considered myself a basketball player playing football. And so anytime you'd be on the bus, like this is high school, like traveling teams, not so much like in university because everyone had like their own phones and shit by then. And you could just watch your own shit. But when they used to put like a movie on the bus, and obviously you guys are used to that from Huntsville, having to travel a lot. But, you put the movie up and it was always a football movie. Like we were like such friggin' meatheads. Like, what kind of movie should we put on? A football movie.
Yeah, like, it wasn't Field of Dreams or anything.
You know what I mean? Like nothing doesn't matter. It just has to be football. Friday Night Lights was a great pick. Remember the Titans was always on
Obviously.
there.
Yeah.
Man,
Marshall.
We Are Marshall. Oh, dude, that movie. Definitely, you can't be watching We Are Marshall in a university team because that friggin' when I watched that in university, I was like, man, this is too close to home.
It's too close to home.
But the Replacements.
The Replacements is always a win.
That's a little bit. It's kind of it's underrated because no one really knows about it so much.
Except it's fantastic.
So good, Keanu Reeves. Unreal.
You can't beat it.
The Replacements. If no one's ever seen it, the boys haven't seen it. So basically, what happens is kind of like the NFL. It's not really the NFL. It's supposed to be though, and they go on strike and they get all these guys to come and
replacement players.
Yeah, they're replacement players, so they're scabs essentially. And they're just like
old college guys
that used to play, old college guys that like were from prison. Anyway, so solid, man. That
fantastic
big sumo wrestler guy. I always felt somewhat mildly offended by the offensive lineman stereotype in those movies, though.
Right, the big dumb guy.
Remember the Titans, like the one, like Louis or whatever. He was like the one main offensive lineman. He was like 400 pounds.
Yeah.
It's like, man,
like, it takes more than just size. It takes more than just
and like it's not like a real get a real alignment. He's gonna be like 6'6" and he's gonna be like super friggin' like athletic, and he might not look like a tub, but he's gonna be like imposing. But everyone just kind of thinks like, and do not get me wrong, there's a lot of linemen with big old guts too, because man, honestly, it happened to me. Like between first and second year, I lost like a shit ton of weight, like way too much weight. And I came back and I felt like I was too light. Like I was like 305 and I just was like too light, which is ridiculous.
I went the other way at first year. I liked it. I poofed out. I call it poofing. And then now when I throw too many candies back, I have to, what I call stop the poof. So I stop the poof.
What do you do? What's your method?
My stop the poof method.
Yeah.
I do a little intermittent fasting. I try and do that. My brother's
Okay.
got me on that, which I actually is just a trick fancy term for don't eat shitty food late at night.
Don't eat shitty
So
food and skip breakfast.
don't eat shitty food. Yeah, and like big protein, try and get some good
Sure.
stuff in you. Basically, it's just like stop the poop is like replace bad
Right.
with good.
Yeah.
It gets me so much because it's like weight loss is such a fascinating tangible example of people. It's like the solution's there. We found the solution. We have it.
Yep.
We'll give it to you. Here it is.
Right.
You just have to actually right there. I said you gotta relax. You gotta relax. That's funny. Yeah, I mean that's a tough one. But yeah, no, stop the poop is big.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's important to know like when you get to that point, because I think people who are unfortunately that get really big, they get to that point and just don't care. Right? Like for whatever reason, they have to recognize at some point that like, oh, maybe I put on a few, or like maybe I got to pump the brakes, and they just either ignore it or just say fuck it and just keep munching because
and they blow through.
Yeah. And again, like that's trouble, like in general, where it's not only behavioral, but I think there's like a genetic component too, right? So there's some people that can eat whatever they want and they're freaking totally skinny and they're chilling, and then there's some people that like as soon as they drink like 2% versus 1% milk,
it's over.
10 pounds.
It's lights out. Yeah.
And like so the way I look at it is that and I heard this from someone else, not my idea, but genetically or with your diet, you should try to eat what your grandparents ate.
Really?
So my grandparents obviously from like Eastern Europe, went through like the Depression over there, went through World War II. Well, technically World War I and World War II, like farm people, like they weren't eating like really well. So basically my parents, but my mom especially, she would have been born from these two parents that their genetics would have been kind of set up that you could eat a potato and you're going to be fine. Like one potato. There. And then now all this food is available to us and we're eating like kings. And then all of a sudden you just like, cause if I just don't get me wrong, I'm not like super strict about my diet, but if I was like if I was really poor with it and didn't exercise at all, like I could get like really big, like just put on a lot of mass kind of thing.
Well, do you think it's quantity or quality now is the problem? Like is it quantity, like we getting the big gulps and the American sizes, or are we doing and like everything has sodium in it now, everything has sugar in it now, like it's just a disaster, you know what I mean?
I think sugar's got a lot to do with it because it's basically in everything. Processed stuff for sure. Again, it's not like I'm not really eating too much of that stuff. I'm not like eating Lunchables and like eating
Baconators
and Hungry Man dinners and stuff, like major crazy processed. Like that's a whole other level of like, again, like you said, sodium and all that stuff. But again, it kind of depends, because sometimes sodium's not awful if you're working out enough and you're sweating and you're getting rid of that sodium and like
everything.
I think it's so individual for each person that you just got to like try it out. Obviously, try stuff out before and see if it works. And I think so many people are just they've only read one book or they've only listened to one thing that told them to do it this way, and they're like, oh, it doesn't work. I guess I'll never lose weight again. And,
well, it's that attitude, man. Behavior is everything at the end of the day. Like,
that's
what I mean. You can't just keep doing what's that insanity quote? You can't keep doing what you've been doing over and over and expect different results. But that's just the reality of your life, right? So
absolutely, precisely. And I think it's tough because food is good, right? Like good food is good. Like there's pleasure from it when you go marché. You're gonna have a good time eating 4 plates of breakfast food because it just tastes good and everything. But then your body's probably not going to really dig on that. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to be a good time.
You got to fuel the machine, baby. You got to fuel it. And by no means,
if you got to put premium gas, in too, right? You can't put that leaded shit in there and expect like everything's going to be okay.
Ethanol, you can't put ethanol in your body. It's
no chance, man.
I knew a guy once. It's over. It didn't work for him. Didn't work.
But I saw again, like you said though, like there's such a behavioral component to it, and I think people are just the last thing they want to do is give up the way they eat, and there's a control aspect to it too. And man, it's very strange. Like, because when I was doing personal training too, a lot of my clients were obviously trying to lose weight, and as not being a nutritionist, I've taken nutrition courses and stuff in school and everything, but it's not like I could give them a super personalized like meal plan and all this stuff. Like, I would like to see people's blood. Like, if I was able to really do it and become a nutritionist, you'd want to see people's blood work. You'd want to see, everything, like vitamin profiles, this and that, and like really, tune that to your diet. And I think that's super expensive and it's not really easy for everyone. But I think if everyone was able to do that, it'd be such a better thing, because there's definitely a certain way for each person to eat, for sure.
Right.
Again, if you have heritage that comes from like the Polynesian islands, your body's probably going to be set up more to have like fruit and like a little bit more high sugar and like natural sugar, but like, different things versus, again, someone who maybe is like Eastern European and they're going to be have eaten a lot of potatoes and stuff and fats and meat, because they didn't have like a lot of stuff available to them too. Right. So
there's no orange juice over there.
No, that's the thing, man. It's so funny. My grandmother was born and raised in Lithuania and came over here. She always used to give us orange for Christmas.
Right.
Because it was just like, that's a special gift.
It's a gift, man. And you're like, listen, I got a bag in my trunk right now. This is a garbage gift.
Dude, I'm telling
you. Even though your grandmother, get rid of shit.
No, but
that'll get you, man. That'll get you.
Yeah, but how's the poof going? Is it coming down?
Well, it's the holidays, man. Like, I just do the nature of my work, which is kind of nice. Like, it's usually quiet when you want it to be quiet. You know what I mean? Nobody wants to see you on Christmas. Nobody wants to. So, you take the time off when you can. And, when you're taking time off, you're doing, laying around and playing video games, eating trash, right? So, but, as long as you understand, you have to dial it back at some point. So, no, it's nothing serious, right? So, it's been working out all right. But back to the grind.
I know I mentioned it, but like, that's the thing, is like knowing when you get to that point, and like, do you think that kind of, and is that a little bit like a sports thing too, that maybe we learned, like, where someone maybe was like, hey bro, like maybe you should lose a couple, and it just gave you that thought in the back of your head? Or what do you think?
I think it's like, for me, I think it's just I don't know, like somewhat of a discipline. Like, my biggest fear is probably like not living up to the potential that you have. So if you kind of feel you're a little off the beat, you kind of like, I got to do something, right? Because it's like, what am I doing here? You got every opportunity in the world to do something right, and you do it wrong. It's like, you got nobody else to blame. That's kind of my thing is, I'm not going to sit around and blame the next guy. It's like, I can only blame myself. And when you're the only one left, you start making choices a little bit differently, right? So I'm a negatively motivated guy, though, for sure, which
I hear you.
A lot of people are not.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, there's one thing that you can take complete agency over. Like, you can't really blame anyone else for you being fat.
Well, exactly.
Right? Like, anyone who just, unless you're being force fed, right?
Yeah.
Which I don't think that's going on too often, unless it's like a fucking Trippy 7 movie or something.
Oh yeah, exactly, right. I don't think that happens very often. But that would be like, dude, unpopular opinion, man. There's one for you. Like, I would say one of mine for sure is like, take ownership, man. It's you did it to yourself. Like, too often people get to a place, and this is big with me, and like, I've like not cut people out of my life, but they do things and they complain about it, and you go, what did you think was going to happen? Like, what? Like, what, seriously? Like, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure that out. I mean, this isn't rocket appliances. Right?
This isn't rocket surgery.
Yeah, like, you know what I mean? Like, what did you think was going to happen? It gets me so many times when people don't consider, okay, well, A, B, C, D is next, guys. Like, did you not think that was going to happen? It just grinds my gear. Just absolutely.
Well, how often do you see that at work?
Oh my God, all the time, man. People, I'll give you an example. So like, obviously what I do is like finance, portfolio management stuff, right? So I'll give you a stat. Canadians, I forget the stat. I'm going to butcher it here, but on average, wealth in Canada, 87% of Canadians' wealth comes from their home equity and their pensions.
Okay.
Which is interesting, because if you read between the lines, what that means is neither of those things they had a choice in paying. They were forced to.
Right.
So give people the option to do what's in their own self-interest, especially when it comes to finances. They won't do it.
True.
Because they don't. It's human nature, right? You got a wife and a kid and a family and, you know, a sick parent, whatever it ends up being, right? And you can come up with any excuse in the world. But the best one in the world I've ever heard, though, is like Tony Robbins has this one. If the government came along and charged you 20% tax right now, what would you do? You'd bitch and you'd moan and you'd pay it.
Right.
And you'd live your life. So the amount of people that say, you know, I got no money left, or I can't save any money, or I can't invest, or whatever. And, you know, there's a huge education piece there, but just like basic personal finance.
Yeah.
You know, save X amount of dollars. You know, they come up with all these reasons why they can't do it. And it's like, well, you're really just lying to yourself. And the worst part is you're only hurting yourself living that way.
Right.
But that education piece in finance is huge, man. Like that's one thing, man. Like society has incredibly low financial intelligence.
Oh my gosh.
And it needs to be rectified, or you're going to see significant problems, right? Like that's why, like, I don't think, you know, if you think of, you know, to put this delicately, you know, poverty, people that were born in poverty and grow up in poverty, how much of the circumstances of their lives result in them remaining in poverty or low income in their life? How much of that is their experience in their life versus how much of it is not being educated at all in personal finance, which those obviously overlap in terms of issues. Sure. But if you had a basic understanding of, you know, you get a check, you work at a job. The amount of people I know that are 40 years old have never read a pay stub. They don't know what the basic income taxes are, basic deductions are, basic pension deductions are.
Right.
You know, taxes are a big thing too, man. Marginal tax rates. No one has any general understanding of how marginal tax rates function.
Shit.
Which just, you know, is an incredibly important thing because, you know, why do you go to work? Like,
sure.
To make money. And if the government's going to take some, you better have a good understanding of why they're doing it and how much they're taking.
Absolutely. Well, and again, like you said, I think so many people are just going blind through things. They don't know.
No,
they think things, and in a certain way, like you said, things are kind of taken care of them a little bit. You know, they're automatically deducted the pension, all that stuff.
Right.
And so, but it's weird that it's not really an education system. Like unless again, once you get to university or the college level, basically, then you're choosing, or I guess there's some business courses in high school, but again, it's business.
But they're not
personal, like finance.
Yeah, exactly. They're not saving or investing or any of that stuff. And again, like you can make it as complicated as you want. Like, you know, all the stuff I do, like portfolio management stuff, like you can go off the cliff, man. Like finance is like outer space. The more you know you don't know. You know what I mean? So like you can go deep, but you don't have to go anywhere close to that.
Sure.
With regards to your own personal life. But taxes are the same. Like right now I'm doing a master's in taxation, man. Like it's as deep as you could possibly think.
Sure.
Your face would just melt right off.
Oh, geez.
Because you have no idea the complexity of how broad it goes. You know,
and it's variable as you go up the ladder, kind of thing.
And there's all these different rules, and you start to learn all these things. Like tax system is designed to be equitable for everyone. Like when people say tax loopholes, like in Canada, there are no loopholes. That's a fictitious sentence. There's things that work better if you already have money.
Sure.
So, you know, the rich get richer. It's like, well, the rule's the same. If you make $40,000 or $10,000 or $40 million, the rule's the same for each of you. It just works a lot better if you've got $40 million. You know? Yeah. So, you know what I mean? And like, that's a big piece. The other thing too, like on taxes, just basic marginal taxes for people is like, if you're making, you know, you're an average person working a job, you know, making 100,000 or less, you really don't pay that much tax in terms of average taxes. Like you're paying on an average basis, you know, like 20, 25, maybe 30% average, which for the services you get is actually incredible. Like the healthcare, the education, the roads, the garbage, like the whole thing. If you're making $60,000, you don't pay that much tax. These people that complain about it, it's like, you don't understand. If you're making like $1 million, like you're paying like $300,000-400,000 in taxes. Like that one person is the same as, you know, 40 or 50 people making 40,000. So it's like, there's that balance there, but nobody wants to hear that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, cause they look at it that they're still, even though they've given up that much money, they have all this other money left, but it's again, it's
that marginal utility, marginal value of that extra dollar for, you know, wealthy people, if that's what you want to call it.
Right.
Now there are some rules that, the other thing with taxes that's really fascinating, I don't know if you care at all about this, but
oh no, this is what we want to hear.
Yeah. So the other thing that's fascinating about taxes is like, there's a social structure of taxes where, you know, there's things that are designed for the society that might remotely interfere with the actual equity of the tax structure. So there's things, and there's and that's where you can snake through sometimes, you know, with businesses and, you know, trusts and certain investment accounts and things like that. So there are some nuanced things that you can snake through that make it advantageous to structure things in a certain way, which obviously is the reason I have the job I have.
Right.
You know, which, you know, it's not tax, it's tax avoidance, which is legal. Tax evasion is illegal.
Sure.
You know, you're just trying to snake the rules, right? Like you want to pay as much as the next guy or as little as you can.
Sure.
That's what everybody wants. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well,
what's the rule? I'll do that.
Right. And even like what we were saying with like, you know, someone makes $1 million. Yes, they have all this other money, but at the same time, what are we saying? Like, we're not going to allow people to make this much money. Like, this is what essentially capitalism is. We need to have, like, there is, unfortunately, when things shake out, there's going to kind of be a little bit of an imbalance there. And maybe some of it's an extreme imbalance with some of these people who are like desperately poor and some people who are like exorbitantly rich. Like, I don't know exactly what to say about that, but that's just kind of the extremes of the scenario. But
which the problem is too many people compare the extremes thinking that it's normal when it's not that common. Like,
for sure. No, each end of that extreme, if it's like in a normal distribution, is obviously very small.
Yeah, I think when you talk about wealth when you talk about like wealth inequality, things like that, like you think of the teeter-totter, like, you know, the doing this doesn't do anything. You have to do this, lift everyone up. Right. And ideally you want to look after the you know, the people that are struggling the most. And I think that becomes a social construct where you go, you know, we're living in a society here. It's a human right to have education. It's a human right to have access to healthcare, things like that. So these people that are struggling, especially with the pandemic going on, and you know, we can touch on things like that. It affects them considerably more than someone who does make decent income or has a job doing something, you know, that you can do online or something like that, right? So it negatively affects poor or low income people more, which then becomes a larger headline, becomes we need to fix this issue. And it's like, yeah, you're right. But how do you solve it, right? That becomes a difficult thing. So I don't believe that people should automatically target wealthy people as somehow that being the problem. Right. Because regardless of how much money any one person makes, like, it's not like that wealthy person took money out of the pocket of this person. That's not how they got their wealth.
Absolutely.
Most of the time. Now, you know, some people might disagree with that, but
unless you're Madoff,
but you know, he didn't hurt poor people. He hurt wealthy people. Like,
right. It's so true.
So nobody was crying. You know what I mean? Like, you take $1 million from a guy with $1 billion and you don't feel so bad, but
so true.
It's still $1 million.
Yeah, no kidding, man. He fleeced a lot of people, man.
He fleeced a lot of people, but you know what, man? If you get fleeced by that guy, man, like, do your own due diligence. But he was lying through his teeth. I mean, he's a con artist, man. The guy was the greatest ever.
You ever seen the Curb episode where they like do a Seinfeld remake?
You ever watch I haven't.
Curb Your Enthusiasm?
I've only watched a few. I haven't seen them all. I get that reaction.
There's an episode. There's an episode where they like essentially get the Seinfeld cast together. You know, George, everyone. And one of the like George's storyline is he got lost all his money in a Ponzi scheme to Madoff.
To actually Madoff? That's what they
say. To actually Bernie Madoff is the storyline in the show that I guess Larry and Jerry might have actually wrote together, because Jerry's in it. It's pretty funny. Like, it's not like they don't end up actually doing it. Spoiler alert. But anyway, like, it's basically
they like talk about doing the rewrite.
Funny, man. George is in it. He's great.
It's found money, man. I want to parlay it. Oh, you mean you want to lose it? How about putting it in the bank?
Yeah,
the
bank.
So good, yeah. So it's weird, man. How have you handled the pandemic in your world? Now they got a new lockdown coming in tomorrow.
Oh my God, I know, right?
What is that, tier 35 of lockdowns?
The stay-at-home order, tier 2.0, DEFCON 3.
The language was written quite a bit, much more aggressively than it's been written in the past, we'll say.
I know. Yeah, absolutely. But yet,
still not a rule.
Vague and obtuse.
I don't hate that it's a guideline.
Right, right.
There is a piece of me that's like freedom. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
I know. Well, that's
Like,
the problem. Is
but
that
also, we're living in a society here.
yeah?
The pandemic, though,
We're
has
in a
shown us several
society.
things. Like, and it depends on where you look, but the pandemic has shown us several things. People are if you look at, let's say, a country that lives near our country,
Yeah,
just doing completely incompetent things. And you're like, this is just such a tangible visual example of the real incompetence of human beings. Leave
absolutely.
people to their own devices and they will inherently do what's not in their best interest.
Right.
And then on the flip side, you get these people that are, great people, and they're buying, $500 gift cards to small businesses, and they're doing all this great stuff, and they're like,
Sure.
supporting, helping each other out and things like that. And it ends up being really great. But,
Right.
you don't hear enough of those stories, right? They don't grab the news titles.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I mean, I think so. I mean, personally, the brewery was deemed essential, so I was, we were essential service, and people need that liquor. Well, it's
Gotta
sad.
get
I
it.
mean,
It's real,
I
man. It's
mentioned
real.
before, but if you pull the rug on some people like that are
It'd be a
dependent
bigger
on it,
pandemic. It would be a bigger pandemic than what we're going through. That
like,
is crazy to think.
like, yeah, man, like that's how Amy Winehouse went down, man. Like you can't just pull the plug and
The
just expect
only
everything's going to be okay.
you had it on one of your other episodes. It's the only drug you can't
You can
just
actually
stop
die
doing.
from the withdrawals. I think maybe like a benzodiazepine potentially, but even still,
Right.
it's
I
just
wouldn't
a
want to
shitty
try
withdrawal.
any of them.
No, exactly. It's just a bad withdrawal where literally alcohol withdrawals can kill you, and that's awful.
Here's what gets me, not being an alcoholic, and by no means am I saying it's a lighthearted issue, because it
Sure.
is a huge issue. It, to me, it's such a fascinating thing because it's such an automatic negative feeling afterwards. Like the down is so bad that, to me, you're like, it's so hard to just like, the last thing I want to do is jump back on the horse. You know what I mean?
Oh man,
But
yeah.
that's a totally different thing. And I understand it's obviously chemical dependency, and there's all these different avenues to that. But it's like such an interesting thing. Like the down is so low that you're like, it's the last thing I could think about doing. Which thankfully, I guess I don't have that issue. But it's
Sure.
a huge thing for people, man. It's hard to deal with.
Well,
There's so much more to it than just that. You know what I mean?
And the stress of everything that's been going on has only kind of led to a little bit more drinking, and it's strange. I mean, the fact that government kept it open, kind of knowing that people are potentially going to drink a little bit more, which is insane. So,
Well, it's time, man. Get the time on your hands.
Yeah, and it's still like it's like kind of like part of grocery too, like because they have in grocery stores now, obviously in Ontario, they're allowing beer and wine and stuff, so it's kind of in there. But again, it's like, I'm more than happy that it was deemed essential, but it's kind of like, what, it's sad that it had to be, really, at the end of the day. But so, all that being said, I'm happy, and it was busy still. If anything, it was busier because we were doing like home deliveries and stuff, and they had me in charge of that, and I was kind of setting all that up, and it was pretty wild because usually when I was going to my other restaurants, making sure everyone was okay, I had like a general route. Every day was like, Monday was this day, this way, certain areas.
Right.
And then with the deliveries, they would come from all over, technically the greater Hamilton area. So like I'd be from
the
Burlington,
GTH.
the GHA, baby.
And
it was like anywhere from like Ancaster to Burlington to like Oakville and all the way back out to like St. Catharines, basically. So it was deep. Yeah, but honestly, again, it's been pretty good, and we've been hanging here and staying inside, and it's brutal. You can't really see anybody, and you got to just kind of,
what do you do? I mean, you doing this podcast, which is sweet, which just for the record,
which is awesome,
crushes my heart because I wanted to do one with you. But you know what? I guess if you want to throw me to the wolves, do one on your own. That's fine.
We're doing the Seinfeld one.
Sign me up, man. Sign me up. Sign me up.
Yeah. Well, again, super brutal that we couldn't do it, even this in person, right? Like, I would love to, when we start the Seinfeld one, that at least we'll get to do it in the same room eventually. We'll do it in the Merv Griffith set. We'll pull it out of the trash.
Pull it out of the trash, man. It's Merv Griffith's cigar.
We'll bring it inside, and we'll friggin' hook it.
Hook it. No, well, I'll come back. I'll do another one with you here.
Oh,
But
of course.
yeah, no, it's good, man. Like it's a weird times. Like
Yeah.
I think when you get in person too, the certain people, the witty banter becomes more powerful.
Well, and you know what? All this video stuff's been amazing, and it's allowed people to, still doing the podcast, still, even just like before I was doing like Zoom parties and stuff, like kind of more like early in the quarantine when it was more when it was more novel. But even still now, like, some of the old lineman buddies will still get together and play like games and shit over Zoom and just have a couple beers and have fun. And it was my buddy's birthday, and we did like a big party, and we played beer, like you could play beer pong on Zoom.
Right.
So you basically like have the other person's things set up in front of you. And
right.
when they make it in like on theirs,
you take
and
it off for them, yeah.
Right. Anyway, it's good times, but
it's good times.
But it's still just not even close to the real thing. And
it's
like,
it's weird, man.
You can't bump into a table and like knock all the other people's beers off.
That's the nature of the beast, though, right?
Right.
It's weird. Like, yeah, I joke about living where I live, obviously up north, like, and sometimes you get stuck because you put your head down, you go to work, and with school and stuff and work, it's like, you're slammed doing other things, right? And
right.
You wake up one day, you take the t-shirt off your head, and it's 5 years later. But I've been joking around. I've been social distancing for 5 years. So it's like I still want to get the t-shirt, the Sasquatch social distancing world champion.
Hey, nice.
the Sasquatch t-shirt.
Unreal.
That'd be quality.
Man, so what's going on up in Huntsville? Like, did a bunch of idiots come up and
oh yeah, we had that run for a while. Like it was it's a little bit different up here. We had a good run, man, for like the first, when it was really bad in the city, like the first kind of wave. Like we had nothing, man. We had 2 or 3 cases in like 6 or 8 months.
Wow.
Now we had more than that, but like it was minimal. And I think now we're getting a couple a day now, so it's starting to creep in. Which, that's the nature of the beast. What are you gonna do, right? So but like they shut everything down here, man. Like we used to have like even a lot of the big stuff that was open before, like the ski hill and things like that, or cross country and stuff. They've shut some of that stuff down, which is yikes. And but it's good, man. Like you can get away with it here because you go to the grocery store, you throw a mask on, and that's what it is, right? But unless you're an anti-masker and stupid.
How many people in Huntsville?
Huntsville's like 20,000 in this like population. Gets like a solid 100 in the summer.
Jeez, I bet.
Yeah, so it's pretty good. But you get a lot of the people were coming up here, and it was a big issue. People that had cottages up here, they would leave the city and they came up here, and everyone's going like, you can't do that.
Right.
Because A, rules for one, but B, we can't have 100,000 people in Muskoka because we don't have the hospital to support it.
Sure.
Right. So it's like, it just doesn't, like, you can't have that many people here all the time. So, it just doesn't work. Now, like the same thing in the summer, like everybody comes here, but we also get, thousands of employees will come here, work in the resorts, and the paramedics staff is that much bigger because of the summer, and which we didn't have.
Yeah.
So it becomes
it's pretty temporary anyway, most of the time, right?
Yeah. So I mean, it is what it is, right? Like,
well, because I saw in the new stay-at-home order that they're saying don't, like, I know that's been the case for a while, but they're saying don't go to your cottage or don't go to any other property you have, like stay at your own. Yeah. And
they're saying like, do not leave your house, like medical appointments and food, and that's all.
Right.
And you're like, Roger.
G night. Well, and again, but that's the thing, and that's the problem we're starting to get into is that, I'm all for it. Everything, obviously, we got to stay safe. We got to people, because we don't know what, like, they don't have a kind of a better plan. Unfortunately, I think that there is a better plan out there, but I don't know what it is. Like, it will always come down to, unfortunately, if we just let things go, we're going to lose a bunch of people, and no one's willing really to make that decision.
Society, man, you got to make sacrifices, man. At the end of the day, like, sitting on your ass at home isn't the worst. Now, working from home for people that are able to, it's those people that complain. You're like, can you do me a favor? Can you shut up for a second? That would be wonderful. Because, how hard is your life really? It's the people that have no work and are struggling to feed their families. That's obviously a bigger issue. But
And those are basically, really, I think those are mostly the people that are causing a big stink too, right? Or the people that, and again, like we said, it's relatively understandable. You're living in a 200 square foot apartment in Toronto. You were a waiter. Your place is shut. Your restaurant doesn't even exist anymore. Like, what are you gonna do, right? You got no family in the province, like whatever. There's definitely people like that, and man, it's got to be trouble. Like that's just mental anguish.
And there's so many things I think that are going to be unseen that nobody really realizes, like, like alcoholism, things like that. But even like, people like domestic stuff and things like that might be an issue.
I've heard that's been brutal. Got a few friends that are like in law enforcement and stuff, and they say that it's been brutal. And like I remember even early in the quarantine, like people would like make little posts like, hey, like say blueberry, like ask me for my blueberry pie recipe, like if you're getting like beat up.
I remember
like,
that.
Man, this is what's happening. Like, this is awful. Can't believe that this is what's going on.
I literally hear things like that, and I'm like, and it's not by any means like my response of like, that's so horrible. Like, how could that actually be a fucking thing? Like, that's crazy. Like, what world are we living in? But it's like, when you live in this like sheltered little cocoon, which has even become more so with COVID, you're like, there is a world existing around you.
Sure.
Take the blinders off. Let's put the sun, the 85-year-old old lady sunglasses. Let's take those off.
Yeah.
And look at the world for what it is. But what can you do, man?
But again, people get so focused on their own little thing too, right? Their own little world. And with social media, it's such an echo chamber that they only follow the people that is just going to be saying the same thing that they're thinking. Man.
Well, they do that. Social media like makes you follow those people.
Absolutely. Well, that's the thing, is that it's all just confirmation bias, and it's all just like, oh, like whatever I don't agree with, I'm just going to ignore, and whatever I agree with, I'm just going to take in on complete faith.
Yeah.
Right. And that's basically, that's pretty close to the definition of insanity. It's obviously,
but how exactly. There's what fits into my unpopular opinion. Like, how long do you blame the system? Like, the people are like, social media is bad. It's like, no, people are bad. You're just now seeing it because it's social. I'm of the belief, which is horrible, that like inherently leaving people to their own devices has never been a good idea. You know what I mean? It's like, no, by no means am I some socialist, like whatever you call it, authoritarian person by any stretch, but but it's just crazy. Like,
well, clearly we need government, like, obviously. And I think it's funny, like, even you can look at sport too, right? Like, you need a referee, right? Yeah. And if the government is like a referee, you need it, like, because people are, there's some people out there, but everything. So Stolichnitsin always says the line between good and evil, like, doesn't run between like nations and like ideals and religions. It runs down the heart of every man. So everyone has like a little bit of that good and evil in them. And that's why we have the government, because we know certain people in certain times, or every person, I should say, in certain times is going to be corrupted, or the power is going to get out of control, or this and that. And I think right now we need to kind of figure out maybe a little better way to govern the government, because it's become such a big separation. But I think at the same time we need it. And again, like those people that are kind of saying that, not too many people are saying we don't need it, but they're so critical of the government and people that are making these decisions. Kind of like, this is supposed to be democracy. We're supposed to be trying to kind of work together with these people.
Yeah.
And it's next to impossible with so many people too. Like, there's a lot, it's hard to have your voice heard.
There's a divide between like that divide between like apathy and passion is enormous now.
Sure,
and
absolutely.
You look at things like, you take a Doug Ford in Ontario, for example, and it's like, I honestly think he's done an adequate job. Mm-hmm. When you get handed a bad hand, nobody ever got famous winning with aces. You know what I mean? Like, what do you want him to do? So it's like, I remember when they were doing the back to school stuff and they were talking about it and everybody's complaining. It's like, what would you possibly hear that you'd go, that's a good idea? There's not one thing he could say. So I'm like, you're giving him a bad hand and then you're asking him to go win the pot. And it's like, you're putting him under the bus. That's got nothing to do with him as a person or as a leader. Guy's doing the best he can, man. We're all just treading water here. Like, what are we doing? Like,
yeah,
and give the guy a little slack. You know, you got to give him some sympathy.
absolutely.
But I've never understood the passion, like, especially like you look at America, man. Like Donald Trump got impeached for a second time. Like, that is ludicrous.
Wow.
And it's not the first thing everyone needs. Why it's not like an Amber Alert of on your phone, this is insane.
Sure.
Because you become apathetic to the lunacy of his administration.
It's so true.
And you go, oh, it's just, you know, it's par for the course. And you're going, no, it's not. It's absolute, you know, mayhem. And thank whomever you decide you want to thank that it's over soon, because the guy's out of his mind. But here's the crazy part.
Mm-hmm.
When he did win, as an example, if we want to get controversial, he won clean and clear. No one said anything.
Yep.
People voted for him. More people, now, not in that structure. I don't want to say more people wanted him than didn't, but the way that it works, he won legit.
Right.
Which is like people chose that. And then you get these people that complain about it. And I'm sure it's not the same people, but it seems a little crazy to me. But
sure. Well,
I've never understood that passion for hatred. I don't get that.
Yeah.
Like, why can't people, I look at my own life and I say, hey man, a guy wants to do this. If you're not hurting anyone else or me, do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. How you can have that passion for hatred. I don't understand that. The energy, where do you find it?
Again, I think people accumulate that in so many ways, and to be, you know, to talk about now with what's happening with COVID, I think all that stress and all that stuff, people need to focus that towards somebody. And unfortunately, a lot of times it becomes government officials, because they are making decisions that are going to ultimately affect everyone kind of on that personal level. Right.
Yeah.
And it's so hard because we've kind of set up, more so in Canada potentially, but even just democracy in general, we set it up that like we you know, the people want to run things, and we want to have all of our inputs and everyone's needs met, and not necessarily have so much disparity happening and this and that. But the problem is that because we have it, we're also capitalists too, and our economy is driven by that whole system, that there's going to be disparity, right? And essentially you're now putting these politicians in a losing position, really, because now they're going to have to try and reconcile these really two different worlds. If we're talking about classes, if we're talking upper class versus the rest, kind of, it becomes this whole dichotomy where, well, who, and maybe more so in the States, but it's the same thing in Canada, who's kind of like paying the bills here, right? It's obviously the more affluent people, so they're going to kind of get all the breaks and stuff. And it's like, and it's not even big breaks, but again, they're just going to be the ones that are kind of going to be on their mind. Most politicians are usually kind of upper class people anyway,
right?
Better socioeconomic status, I should say. But again, you know, it becomes, we're putting so much responsibility on these people, and then when they make a decision that doesn't go their way, no one is willing to be like, well, okay, that's how. Well, not no one, but there's a few people that actually are like, all right, yeah, totally, like, we kind of get it. That decision was based, they gave us all the information, and sometimes they don't give us information. Like sometimes, you know, there's a big natural disaster or a bombing somewhere, and all of a sudden a crazy bill gets passed, and it's kind of like, okay, that's a little bit shady.
Yeah.
But most of the time there's at least some kind of, they at least present some type of reasoning for what they're doing. And who are we to know, because we don't see the whole picture too, right? Again, we don't have access to all that stuff.
Like, yeah, I mean, you're not, and not everybody's going to agree, but I think the problem is, like you said, with that disparity or that apathy versus passion side of it for some people, especially on a political scale or spectrum, you don't have, especially in some places, or certainly the news we see in North America, where, you know, the benefit of the doubt, like politicians are the goalies of society. You know what I mean?
Sure.
If they do their job, they're a Hall of Famer, the greatest goalie ever. That's it. Nobody sees it. Right. But you get scored on, and it's big thing on the news that you're a big joker, and you're going to get traded to Toronto. It's just crazy, right? And unfortunately, you know, you do have to give people the benefit of the doubt sometimes, and assume that they're inherently doing what's best for the greater good. Like I look at a Trudeau like that, and, you know, by no means is he the greatest guy in the world, but I don't think anyone could look at him and say he's a bad person who's evil and wants to, screw over the little man. It's like, you know what? Hey, if you look at your life objectively and start to realize you're doing okay, like, I think you want someone that is a good, kind person that genuinely wants what's good for society. And if that means that it doesn't help you, but it helps society, that's really ultimately what's best. Like, I look at, any voting or political system, like, you look at it, everybody looks in their own self-interest, but you have to consider the greater good. Like, I look at my own perspective, no family, young, I don't have much need for teachers right now. I don't have much need for nurses right now. Do I see the value they provide in society? Of course I do.
Absolutely.
So then, I have to consider that when I make choices. But a lot of people just inherently complain about things that don't affect their lives. It's like, hey, dude, it's going to affect your life in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or whatever. Or it did. You got it before. You got the benefit before, and now you want to change it to because you don't care anymore. Like, that's a little selfish. But that's the blinders piece. Take them off.
That's the thing. It's the blinders. That's what it is. It becomes so individualized that everyone's so focused on their own story and everything that's just right in front of their nose. And again, as an individualist society, versus collectivist culture versus, in some East Asian cultures, or that collectivist vibe where it's they don't even really have the concept of I and mine and all this stuff. That's how things get done over there. But here we're kind of trying to impress that ideal on people that are more individualized, right? Which is totally fine. That's all I really know. So I'm not necessarily saying that that's wrong and that collectivism's better. And, it's just two slices of the pie. But because we have all this individualism, and then you layer social media and just basically our culture in general, everything's always about trying to be more individualized, trying to be, this is my thing. This is the custom thing. No one else has this. I'm the only person who has this. My only thing. Right. Everything. But as much as that can be satisfying to an individualist and having that feeling of, oh, this is mine. Then all of a sudden, because humans are inherently cooperative, then all of a sudden when you actually need someone to lean on, you're on this island and you're like, man, all this stuff that I like and I enjoy has imprisoned me. It's actually funny. It's that's what Huxley. So Aldous Huxley wrote Brave New World. Have you ever read that?
Yeah.
And then George Orwell wrote 1984. They're basically heralded as kind of like the two like main utopia or dystopian novels, where 1984 is oppression and censorship and Big Brother's watching, and then Brave New World is everything's about feeling good and like don't worry about anything that's important because it's just all about pleasure. And essentially what Huxley was saying in Brave New World is that we will be imprisoned by our pleasures. And essentially that's kind of what's happening, right? More and simultaneous censorship and surveillance is happening too. So Orwell is right with a bunch of stuff. But again, that whole idea of like, man, just what I like and what I do, what I thought at one point was something that was going to make me more of an individual and make me feel a certain way, whole or just liked or whatever that feeling that drove that want was. But it ended up making me, it only brought me further away from everybody. And then social media is like all these people who never would have had a voice, never, ever. No. They would have been raving lunatics on a corner at best. Now, right? Are now have thousands of followers and are freaking out and are getting retweeted by somebody. And people think, like, oh, that's because of social media. It's a misnomer. We've named the social asset. We put media like attached to it.
Yeah. It's right? Like climate change and
where media was like the news. The news was supposed to be, like Bill Hicks again says, the news is supposed to be the news. It's supposed to be objective and it's supposed to come at you. And for a while it kind of was that, but even still, the further you go back, even go back to like the newspaper days, there was corruptions and people holding back truths and this and that and this.
That's that contrast, man. That's such a huge piece. Like, what you own ends up owning you, right? Like you said, like I was just saying there, like climate change. And I mean, that's a word they invented. It's global warming. It was always global warming. And then they changed it to be that. Social media is like that. Death tax is like that. They changed it to death tax. Sounds like a bad idea. Right. Well, it was always a wealth tax. That's what it is. It's the wealth tax.
Right.
Labeling it death tax makes it sound worse and people don't want it. right? So like Dick Cheney did all that, man. There's
Right.
big things like that. But
Bastard.
that contrast is a huge, huge piece. Like
Sure.
I'm a big believer in that. You know, human beings are over influenced by contrast. They have no absolute scale. Like
Mm-hmm.
you don't know what's good and bad. You know what's better and what's worse. You know what I mean? That's a huge, huge piece of that. And people really struggle with that. And like people don't objectively look at their lives and go, okay, things are going pretty good here. Could they be worse? Could they be better? What is that contrast from where you are? Instead, what they do, like, sorry, that's what they do instead of going like, okay, objectively, where am I on the scale of whatever I want to make up?
For sure.
But contrast is a big, like, to me, contrast is absolutely one of the biggest drivers in human behavior that you can absolutely find, because it just accurately predicts that huge disparity that you've been talking about, that apathy versus passion, or the, you know, lack of motivation that some people have to do certain things because they're in a comfortable place, but maybe they want to not be there, or maybe they want to be in a more you know, a different place or whatever. But that contrast, like, you always think you need to continue to change, and it's
do you think that there's a lot of people that are capable of like pulling back and really observing objectively, like you said, their place though?
I think if people have the ability to be comfortable in their own skin, which is a whole other issue, then that frees them to look objectively at themselves. They say no one can look objectively at themselves. You know what I mean? It's impossible in theory, but I think you have to be comfortable enough with yourself to not lie to yourself about stupid insecurities and things like that, or fully openly accept who you are as a person, which allows you to have that comfortability, which allows you to say, I'm not good at this, I can go here, or I'm not good at that, I can change this way, or whatever. But comfortability with yourself is the biggest piece, which ties into that contrast piece that a lot of people struggle with.
I think that's really, really important too, right? I think a lot of people, because of their insecurities, they tend to potentially lie to themselves, right?
Everybody does, man.
Right, everyone does to a certain extent, right? I think everyone has that to a certain extent, and I think unfortunately that can kind of branch out to like really big picture stuff, right? You know,
for sure it does.
And I think, you know, I think a lot of people can kind of step out of things and look at things a little bit more objectively. It doesn't necessarily make things easier, but it allows you to have that kind of critical thinking aspect. But you really need to kind of elevate into that mindset of like, okay, let's just think if it wasn't me or whatever. But some people are so entrenched in their own thinking that they can't even imagine that another person thinks differently than them. So then when they come in contact with someone and there's conflict in their life, they become that much more, you know, that they're that much more frustrated, because they're going, why is this person doing this? They're thinking the way I am, but they're not acting the way I am. Meanwhile, everyone has a different mind. You know, we learned that really young. We learned the theory of mind, that like what I think and what I see isn't exactly, it's close. It can be close, obviously, when you're having a shared experience, but what's in my head is not what is in what other people's heads, right?
Yeah, well, it's based on human experience and your own experiences in life. But yeah, I would say, you know, exactly what you said, that comfortability with self, that self-actualization for yourself, like, allows you to, you know, consider other things. And I think when you're happy and, you know, comfortable in your own shoes, you have the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which takes years, it takes maturity, it takes, you know, comfortability. And that could be not only from, you know, you've got a great girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever you want, you got a good job, you're comfortable. Like, I think you can get to a place which some people never get the chance to get to, where, you know, you're financially secure and you go, you can't hurt me, so nothing you say can bother me. Absolutely. So now I'm comfortable enough to go, so what's actually bothering you? What's the story? Right. You know, like, I can put myself in your shoes and understand better, because, you know, if you berate me and go off on me about being the worst guy, I go, hey, you know, that guy's going through a tough day. It's you can step back.
Yeah. Well, and that might not even necessarily need financial security. You know, that's just, again, that's that personal security too, right? Where it's just, you feel, okay, I'm okay with myself. I understand I have my own faults and whatever, but then, all right, what would it be like if I was this person? What would I be like? But again, you know, that is just, again, it's the individual that becomes so entrenched, and with social media and other things, these echo chambers, all they hear is their own thoughts. They don't hear contradictory stuff. And it's especially with COVID, it's tough now, because you know, I look at it like first year, man, was like going into the residence experience, I think is one of the best like human socialization
Oh yeah.
like scenarios, whatever you want to call it, right? You know what I'm talking about.
It's like 10 years of friendship in 2 weeks.
Immediately you're meeting all these people, everyone's in the same relative scenario, you know, everyone's from probably some other place, you know, and it's just
Contrast.
and you it's kind of a sink or swim scenario too, right? Like you can
Dread,
go out
yeah.
there and you can blow it,
I've seen
right?
it. People blow it, man. It's
And then you
crazy.
never see them again. You're
Then you
like,
never see them again.
hey, what's
God,
up? Someone does some weird shit and they don't laugh and they're weird about it, and you're like, okay, we live in the same building, but I've never seen you since.
yeah, what happened?
Right. And then
But,
the same thing goes on. And I think some people that aren't privy to that, it's brutal. It's really awful.
but that's socialization. That's what that does. And that's where you lose it in a pandemic, exactly like you said, right? But like, you think of like an only child and stuff, like, dude, most people, you meet an only child, within 2 minutes, you can go, you don't have any siblings, eh? Like,
No doubt.
you know what I mean? Sometimes they're great. I'm not saying they all are,
Right.
but
Oh yeah.
that's a stereotype, but
Sure.
you can see it, right? Like I remember when I was in housing, like we used to do a ton of big mental health stuff, right? Big stuff. And we were trained on suicide and, you know, heavy mental health, you know, depression, obviously all the big ones. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of the tough ones. But you know, sexual assault, things like that, and you know, how to deal with it. But I can tell you right now, man, I dealt with, like, personally, because of the job that I had, I was looking after like the staff and softs and, you know, first years or upper years or whatever. You see a ton of it, man. You see a ton of it, and you'd think it's in first years. And I saw a lot of it in the actual leaders, like the upper year leaders.
Right.
10 to 1.
Wow.
You wouldn't believe it, man. It was crazy. Like the amount of difficulty that they would go through was considerable. And I think it was that contrast. It was that manic behavior, like the highs and the lows.
Right.
And a lot of these people, especially when you get into the, you know, people heavy suicide stuff, you know, people have a hard time because they themselves look after, you know, students, and they're helping students. I think, you know, a lot of people struggle. You got to go down in the mud to get somebody, and they get stuck in the mud themselves, right? So it makes it really tough for some people. And some people they just have it. Some people can do it and handle being around that and handle talking people through that. And some people can't.
Sure. Well, some people tend to take on other people's emotions in those scenarios too, right?
That's the mud thing. Yeah, they get stuck there, right?
Yeah. But again, and that's kind of, you know, it speaks back to my point too, where you got to get put into those situations to actually know what's going to happen, right? And it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for some of those people that struggle with it, obviously. But again, you know, oh, did you lose your light there?
Yeah, I'm turning my screen. My computer screen is so huge that it. Hold on.
Wake up. But anyway, like I was saying, it's you know, you kind of get thrust in those situations, like whether it's first year or, you know, like there was like a 100 and something guys on the football team, and, you know, all different ages, different groups, everyone's
different crowds,
totally different interests, like from everybody. Obviously, usually if you have 100 people, you get a pretty decent population like difference, right? Like usually, you know what I mean? You kind of get a little bit of flavor from every zone. And again, we were all together, and again, that whole res thing is like, you know, it's just that you're placed in, and maybe there's going to be like kind of like awkward scenarios. Maybe there's going to be kind of like, you know,
you have to go through
fights or whatever, but that's the thing. You got to go through it. And I think right now everyone's so used to just avoiding and just not
deflecting and non-confrontational.
Hey, even if you're anticipating something's going to be hard, like, how can I get myself out of this? How can I avoid this scenario? To think, oh, and it's with the best intentions. It's to say, oh, okay, like this is like, I just want to make things easier. How can that be bad? But unfortunately, we need to have some friction. We need to have some stuff in life that's heavy duty, that is going to give us those learning experiences, right?
Yeah,
man. No one's really asking for it, but you can't avoid it.
the biggest, most successful people in the world know that that's the only way to grow. You know, and growth is at the end of your comfort zone. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like for you, for anyone, like, you know, I try and look at it in my own life and think, you know, like, where do I want to go? Where do I want to be? Do I want to be a better person tomorrow? Well, like the only way to do that is to go to that line, you know what I mean? And keep crossing it, keep putting one foot in front of the other. So many people just avoid it forever and they stay the way they are, right? But that's stages. That's that self-actualization piece. That's that comfortability piece. That's that once you have those things, you're then able to go, okay, I can actually sit here and think, okay, how is my life? What do I want to do? Okay, I want to get to here. Well, now I know the steps to get there, right? A lot of people have no idea where the road is. Right. And then when they get to the road, the car they're driving sucks anyway, and they don't want to go anywhere. And they stand up staying where they are. I know a lot of people, like sometimes even myself, it's like, you know, even with silly stuff, if I get you know, a Google question or something, I go, if I know where to find it, I go, oh, I don't need to learn it because I know where to find it. Then I go, no, like that's inherently wrong. Like learn the thing right now. So now you know it. You don't need to look it up somewhere.
Right.
And a lot of people just go, it's off. I know how to get there, so I don't need to drive there. Right? I've seen a picture of Yosemite. I don't need to go there. It's like, that's backwards, man.
Right. Experience is the key, right? You have to actually
how you track your life.
Something. Yeah. And, you know, I think that's how you kind of know what you're made of too, right? Is through those little tests, through those little things that you put yourself through. And so what if you do put yourself through that and you might not come out the way you want to at the beginning of things, if your goal is to get better, you know, there's obviously going to be a point where you're not as good as you are. Right. But if you, again, just only avoid things and only avoid, you know, and obviously it's not like, you know, I'm saying like go and like get into fights and stuff. But again, it's like if there's
Fight Club, not Tyler Durden.
And that's that whole idea. Essentially, that is that whole idea is that people get so stuck in their own life and their own routine, and they're just doing the same thing over and over again, that they just want someone to punch them in the face because it's just so easy. Everything's so soft and everything's so chill that I just need some kind of resistance or friction or something, because throughout our species lifetime, there's always been some kind of like major struggle, right? Whether it was like we didn't really have like proper housing, or we were like coming from this weird climate that didn't really do, or like there was diseases that we were fighting, plagues. Some guy was going around killing people, like
invading it.
And even now, like, yes, obviously the pandemic's awful, but it's not like by any means like even close to like what has happened to our species in the past too, right? And then natural disasters and all this stuff, right? So throughout history,
Mother Nature's a mad scientist,
right? and our systems are set up to deal with those major stressors. And unfortunately, when we don't have those inputs, all of a sudden our brain, it becomes really good at like creating these scenarios where we're upset or where we're not happy or whatever, and realizing that, you know, it's a first world problem, as they say, right? It's not something that's actually, you know, it's not life threatening, but yet our body is essentially reacting as it is.
Coaches got too comfortable, it seems.
Right. Well, and you know, there's a good chance that, like, well, not a good chance, but we're obviously still evolving, right? Like we don't see that as much, and we don't really experience that because it's such a long process, but we're clear as like we haven't stopped evolving. And I think that if things keep going, we'll probably start to evolve some other pattern recognition program that isn't gonna, you know, create anxiety and create these stresses and these things that exist in today's world, because potentially, as some psychologists are saying, because our fight or flight systems or our subconscious processing systems are set up to just deal with saber-toothed tigers coming to try and chase us or whatever.
Throwing spears on, tying rocks to sticks.
You know what I mean? And again, that's why now, because we haven't evolved past that, we have to have something in our life that does challenge us. And whether that is, again, you're going in and finding your fight club, you're going out and finding some external mode of expression, whether that's through artwork or whether that's through playing sports, and, you know, you go join a men's league, go whatever, or again, in your regular day-to-day life, you don't kind of shy away from those mildly challenging. And I'm not saying like, again, start, beak off your boss or anything. I'm just saying if there's like, oh, I got to make this call. I don't really want to make this call right now. Just do it. You got to do it. It's not going to be any better later. If you do it now, you'll probably be more happy that you got it done. Yeah. And those little tiny wins that, can add up and just makes you feel better and better and stuff too. Right. And, these are obviously, some things can be easier said than done, but at the same time, it's just don't shy away from the challenge. Right.
That's a huge part, man. Like, that's enormous. I agree with that. That's big.
And like when we were, doing like kind of, our level of sports or whatever, that challenge was just inherent. We just, every game, every practice, every moment that we were actually in the sport, just we were constantly technically being challenged, but that was a conscious effort for us to actually go in and play the sport. Right. Yeah. And I think again, that's the value that you'll always see that comes from sport. And that's why, again, bosses will always like to hire ex-athletes because they understand, these people have been not only competition, but these people have been challenged.
Yeah.
And if somehow you can figure out that was a good, that the athlete was like a good athlete and like maybe won a lot of stuff, then you're like, that this person can overcome all these challenges. Right. But
that's a huge part of it. Huge part.
Yeah. But yeah.
Sports.
But yeah, man, I think that's a perfect place to end it. I mean, continue to challenge yourself. You got to go out there. Everyone's got to go out there and, find what gives you that challenge that allows you to keep honing things, right? Because you got to grind the axe against something to make it sharp, right? It's not just going to be sharp.
No doubt, man. Take the blinders off, keep your ball in the short grass, and you're
laughing. That's it. Keep your stick on the ice. Man, well, it was awesome talking with you. I was, so happy to have you on. We're gonna have it on again, hopefully in person. But you want to shout out anything? You want to shout out the Unity Financial or anything?
Yeah, man, no doubt. I mean, obviously, thanks for having me on. Appreciate the time. Absolutely, Unity Group Financial is my business.
Yeah,
man, check it out. We've been doing a ton of social media recently, so check it out. Instagram, Unity Group Financial, and we get some good stuff on there, personal finance stuff. So
wicked.
Some cool things there for
Huntsville area and around. Hit them.
Yeah, we get a lot. We do all over the GTA and stuff too. So we're all over.
Yeah, that's totally amazing. Right on, man.
Appreciate it.
Right on. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Remember, follow us on socials and subscribe to the YouTube. And we'll see you next time. Cheers.